Hi guys, welcome to Monday Chit Chats. I'm scared to see this video and edit this video because I definitely sound and feel a little bit sick. I'm really not over that cold that I've had for almost 3 weeks now. I don't know what kind of illness this is. I saw a lot of people say COVID, but I've had COVID 3 times. Like, I know what it feels like, and it's definitely not the same. I feel like it's maybe allergies just because, like, it's very much spring in Paris. There's all these like trees and plants that are coming into bloom, so maybe it's that. I don't know, but I'm still roughing it out. I have so much to talk to you guys about. Last week was absolutely crazy for me. I started off with a trip to London, and I sent my mom and my best friend a picture, and they were like, "You didn't even tell us you were going to London." I was like, I didn't realize it was that big of a deal, because from Paris, it's literally just a train ride to London. So to me, it was nothing special. But oh my god, I have so many stories from London. First of all, I missed my train. I had no idea. I mean, okay, maybe this is a little bit delusional to think, but I just didn't really consider that the process of going from France to the UK, not that the UK is not in the EU, like the customs process and going through border security was going to be a lot of time. And so I'm just la-di-da, you know, arriving at the train station half an hour early like I normally do. And here's the thing, when you're just taking a train in France or from France to another EU country, the train, like, you're allowed to board that train up until 1 minute before departure. Like, they don't close off gates or anything. And yeah, there's obviously no passport control or like bag checks. You just get on the train. And so I didn't even consider the fact that I was leaving the EU, and obviously I'd have to go through border control. And the thing is too, like, they sent like actually the Eurostar, that's the train from Paris to London. They sent probably 8 emails, okay? And in none of these emails, okay, one of them had it. One email did say arrive between 45 and 60 minutes in advance, but they wrote it in small black font at the very bottom of my ticket. I'm like, maybe that should have been in bold red at the top of the ticket. Anyways, I mean, like, obviously I should have thought more about this for sure. But I'm like, la-di-da, filming the train station because I wanted to vlog my day trip, right? And Jean, he dropped me off at the train station. He's like, oh my gosh, Arielle, like, it says last call for your train. I was like, what? So I'm running through the Gare du Nord trying to get to the train station. And this is the first time in my entire life that I have been last onto boarding anything. Trains, plane, buses. Like, I am not the person that's gonna be late. I was like, oh, 30 minutes in advance, like, that's more than enough. So anyways, there was a couple people that did arrive after me. I'd say there was about 10 more people that arrived after me, but it was just like massive amounts of people that had to go through border control. And so I got there, like I said, 30 minutes early. I think my train was leaving at 8:30, so I got there at 8, and we obviously had to go through passport control. And there was maybe 150 people ahead of me, and all of the staff were like, don't worry, we'll get through, you will get on your train, nobody panic. So I wasn't really stressed about it because I just assumed that they would have to check my passport and then I could board on the train. I'm like, 30 minutes is more than enough time for that. So I get past the border control, and then, again, I don't know why I didn't assume this, but they have to check your bags and your person. Like, it's just like an airport. You have to walk through, like, those machines that scan you, and you have to put all of your bags through the machines that check things, which means like unloading all your electronics, taking off your belt, your shoes, your coat. I was like, as soon as I turned the corner after border control, like passport control, I see these machines and I'm like, oh, I'm not getting on this train. There's no way. It was pretty fast, okay? It was pretty fast. By the time I got through border control, bag check, I was able to, like, I saw the platform because it was below, you have to like go downstairs. I saw the platform and it was 8:21. So to me, I'm like, okay, no problem. I have 9 minutes to board the next train. But they close the gates to board the train 10 minutes before departure. And so, okay, I was definitely one of the last people to go, like, to arrive at the train station. But there was 150 other people minimum who were stopped and could not get on the train. Like they couldn't go onto the gate. And we're all there like frustrated because we see the train in front of us. We just can't go through the door to get there. And they're like, no, you'll have to get the next train. They make us line up to switch our tickets to the 9 a.m. train. And it was just like, it was so funny because there was this like collective sigh of 150 people when we all had our new tickets in hand and 8:30 rolls around and the train leaves and it's all just like, oh, man, you wouldn't let us on the train like that. Oh, I don't know. I don't know why they closed the gates 10 minutes early, but all that to say, the 8:30 train left on time and all of us were stuck with these, I think it was 9 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. train tickets, which was the next train. It was nice. They exchanged our tickets for free. But then they have all over the PA system saying like, oh, there's delays, there's an unanticipated amount of volume going through border control. They really emphasized the unanticipated and they didn't have the capacity to deal with all the people going through the border control. And a couple people were like, what do you mean you don't know the capacity? Like you sell tickets, you obviously know the capacity of people who are going to be going through border control. And so they're announcing these things like delays. And I was like, I am not missing the next train. I got my ticket and I stood in line in front of that door, like literally from 8:21 until, I think it was 9:15. Okay, so I'm there for almost an hour standing at that gate. And 9:15 rolls around and I'm like, okay, I'm concerned here because if they close the gates 10 minutes before departure and they haven't even opened them like 15 minutes before departure, you're telling me that hundreds, if not like 1,000 people have to get on this train in 5 minutes? Like that's kind of crazy. Like I'm not surprised that 150 people weren't able to get on the 8:30 train. And yeah, there's just like mass panic. All the people who are minding the gates are like, you know, talking amongst themselves, trying to figure out what's going on. We're all panicked because like, oh hell no, we can't miss the next train. Like what? And so anyways, they finally started to open the gates, I want to say around 10 or maybe 9:45, okay? And so we're getting on the train and I'm thinking, okay, they've opened the gates, they're gonna close them in 10 minutes, just like they did for my train. And they left them open for 45 minutes. So the next train, the first train left on time. Instead of delaying that train, okay, if you want by 5 minutes and letting the full people, like, I understand I was late, but there was, I'm telling you, 150 people who also weren't able to get on that train, who weren't late like I was. So instead of delaying that first train, they delayed the second train by almost 2 hours because there was so much chaos of people changing tickets and like getting on the next train. So that was an absolute mess. That was a very long-winded story. I'm sorry about that. But I think it's a good story to share to anyone else who plans on taking the train from Paris to London, to know that you really do have to be there, I would say 45 minutes in advance. I think 60 is a little bit excessive. Then on the way back, when I was going from London to Paris, because I just did a day trip, and I was like, I am absolutely not missing my train because I was on the last train out of London back to Paris. I'm like, if I miss it, I'm literally sleeping in the train station. So I look at my emails, and this one from London to Paris, they tell you to be there 1 hour to 1 hour and a half early. So I'm like, I will be there an hour and a half early, no questions asked. Like, I'm not missing this train. So I get there an hour and a half early, and I go through border control and customs, and it takes maximum 15 minutes. Like, it was so fast. So I'm in this train station, and I'd actually gotten there 2 hours early. I was like, I really am not playing games. And so once I got through border control and bag check, I arrived at like the waiting room for all the trains, and I was there an hour and a half early, like they had suggested in their email. But the problem is the capacity of the waiting room is not more than the capacity of one train. So you have, I don't know, maybe let's say 300 or 400 seats in this waiting room. There's nothing else. Like, there's nowhere else for people to go. It's just one square room. And so me, along with everybody on my train, the train before us and the train before them, are like crammed into this square, large, okay, it's a large waiting area, but you've got like thousands of people. So I mean, I just ended up camping out on the floor, like by the emergency exit, because there was like nowhere to sit or stand. I feel like this is turning into a rant video, but it's just like, honestly, the train was a lot more complicated than I thought. All that to say, I think if you are doing the trip from Paris to London, definitely you want to arrive like 45 minutes early, but I would say like an hour and a half, 2 hours is definitely excessive. But it was definitely very, it was a very chaotic experience for me. And the reason I ended up going to London in the first place is because I was able to find really cheap tickets. The tickets I think were 40 euros from Paris to London, maybe 35 back. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like a fun vlog to make, going to London for the day. So you guys will see that on my channel. And other than the train ride, London was honestly amazing. I didn't expect to have this feeling, but as I was on the train and we were coming into London, because when you take the Eurostar, you go underwater, so it's like blacked out for, I don't know, 30 minutes, and then you get out of the tunnel and you're in England. And I just had this feeling of being excited to be on another adventure, and I just had this feeling of like, I'm ready to, not ready, but I want to move on. I want to discover something new. I want to go on a new adventure. I want to move to a new place and experience a new culture and a new country and I don't know, just new people. And I thought that was really interesting because I was talking to my best friend about it, and she's someone who is very grounded. She's very happy living in Toronto. Like, she's very stable. She's got her family, she's got her friends, she's got her life. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. She is perfect back home in Toronto. And when I compare it to myself, I have a hard time staying anywhere for longer than 3 years. I've said this before. Paris is the city that I've lived in for the longest. It's been about 3-4 years, and I'm restless. I'm like ready to move. And so it's very strange for me to have this feeling of constantly seeking new things, seeking adventure, and to compare that with my best friend who is very content being at home and like very satisfied with that. It's just very two different lifestyles, I guess. And I'm always like, why do I constantly want to seek out adventure? But yeah, I really did enjoy London. It was so clean. It was so safe. There were so many policemen, and they walk around in these like yellow vests so you can easily identify them. And they were just walking around everywhere, not bothering anyone, but just their presence made you feel more safe. And the people there were smiling and they were kind. I went to a couple restaurants and museums, obviously, and everybody was just smiling and so kind and so happy. And it was such a difference from Paris. And I don't mean this in a way to complain about the people in Paris or French world, like that's not what I mean. It's just a totally different culture. I think it's more like an Anglophone culture maybe, where I mean, you're obviously focused on the customer service, like the waiters and the staff that I spoke to were just so friendly to me. It was, I don't know when the last time I experienced that was, but even the people just on the streets, you would see them smiling and laughing, and you don't really see that so much in Paris. And I was also really surprised by the style. I started my day out in this more southern part of London, and it was a lot less touristy. It was very much, I want to say like residential with like a lot of restaurants and boutiques, and it wasn't like the downtown Buckingham Palace, like center tourist area. And so I saw a lot of people going to work or going on their lunch break, and they were just wearing these very, like especially the men, these sharp suit and ties with these perfect haircuts. I was like, wow, they dress so beautifully here. Like, it's surprising because you think that Paris would be like the capital of fashion, but I was very impressed with what everybody was wearing to work in London. They all looked beautiful. So I think that's all I had to say. Well, I have my coffee in my hand, I'm just spilling it all over myself. But I have coffee like dripping all the way down my phone. That's gross. Anyways, I think that's all I wanted to say about London, but I did have one more comment to make about the train ride back home from London to Paris, which I said I took the very last train. I think it left, I want to say at 8 p.m. and it arrived in Paris. Sorry, it left at 8:30 and it arrived in Paris at 11:30, 11, something like that. Okay, it was like a late train. It was nighttime. And you know when you go on a plane, a bus, a train, there is this element of respecting the common space by putting in your earphones, by not having phone conversations. Like, it's known, it's socially known to be respectful in these common places, on these long trips, these nighttime trips, because nobody, I don't know, like you shouldn't impose your conversation on your music on other people. Like, everyone knows this, and that wasn't the issue. The issue I had was that I was in a train, like a car on the train, with several children, and the parents of these children, to occupy their kids, had electronic games, like loud games for preschool level children. And these two children in particular had these kind of like Dora the Explorer games where they would like push a button and it'd be like, oh, good try, do this one, or like it was that voice, like a sound like, oh, congrats, like, or if they got it wrong, like, oh no, do da da da. I don't know if I'm describing it properly, but it was like a Dora the Explorer vibe of kind of a game. And they played that game for the entire train trip. And I didn't have battery in my headphones, so I couldn't wear my headphones. So I had to sit for 3 hours or 2.5 hours listening to these kids play on their electronic toys. And on one hand, I totally get it. Like, we don't want to, I don't know, being a parent is hard, having younger children is hard. Like, I really do think that you have to give grace to parents with small children, and it's important to include children in communal spaces. I really like the quote of like, it takes a community or a village to raise a child. I really do think that even if you don't know the children, it's important to, you know, be kind to them, be kind to the parents and all that. But there is this element of like, I don't know, it is kind of disturbing everybody for your kids to be playing these electronic games. So I'm like, is it socially acceptable for children to be playing these games for an entire train ride? Or like, do we expect kids not to play these games? I'm like, I think if it was me, I would probably maybe read to my kid on the train in a quiet voice. I really thought the electronic games were excessive, and I was telling John about it because it was so loud. He was like, oh, well, maybe ask them to turn the volume down on their toy. But I'm like, I don't think children's toys have like volume control. I think it's just one setting. So yeah, I don't know. I thought I would ask you guys what you think about that. Another thing too, it happened on both train rides to London and back home to Paris. I was sitting beside a man on both times, and both of them, it was like clockwork. They got in their chair, they put down the middle armrest, and they put their arms on both armrests. And I'm like, I'm not a petite woman. I'm a bigger sized woman. Like, just in my body build, I'm bigger than most European women. So it was very uncomfortable for these men to take up both armrests and like really take up that space. And it was surprising to me how both men, it was like the first thing they did when they sat down, and they didn't have any qualms or hesitations about hogging the middle armrest. I was like, wow, is that like a man thing to like want to take up space? Or I don't know. I definitely could have asked them. No, I don't think I would have. I'm like, would I have asked him to share the armrest? I don't know. To me, it's like not a big deal, but it was very surprising that both men just immediately took up all the space beside us. Okay, so that's it for my my London experience. Honestly, it was so fun. I really do recommend that if you are in Paris for the long term, or if you're looking for a day trip, it was honestly really nice. And I don't think the train tickets were too expensive. I think 40 is a pretty affordable price to take a 2.5 hour train ride to another country. So yeah, I mean, I had a great time. I definitely recommend it. Just make sure you don't miss your trains. Okay, another big part of my week last week was continuing to do museums for my itineraries. I'm trying to do every single museum in Paris, and whenever I go to a museum or an exhibition or anything, I really like to do the guided tours just because you always get extra tidbits of information, and those are kind of like the insider tips that I like to include on my itineraries. I learned very interesting things about the Musée d'Orsay, for example, and I'm gonna include those in my little guides. So yeah, one thing that struck me about the Musée d'Orsay is I was on the greatest works, like greatest hits, you could say, of the Musée d'Orsay, where we would go through like key points of the museum instead of like, the museum is huge. So it was like a fast track, see the highlights kind of thing. And one thing that really struck me, she was showing them this, like all of the paintings were done by men. And one thing that really struck me that she said is she was talking about this painter that went to a fine art school. I think it was like mid 1800s. And she was saying that at the time, all of the fine art schools were reserved for men only. Like, women weren't able to go into the fine art schools. And my first thought was, I imagine the art we would have. Like, okay, don't imagine. How do I phrase this? It is mind-blowing to me that most of the art that we have and that's showcased on these greatest hits tours, showcased in these very famous museums, are done by men. And it really is like we are lacking an entire half of the population's perspective on life. And I'm like, how interesting would it be to be able to see life through the eyes of women at the time? It's just such a shame that women were deprived of being able to, I mean, I'm not an art historian, okay? Like I don't know a lot about women and men art and what the rights were at the time, but the guy did say that women were banned from going to these fine art schools. So I just really thought like it would have been so interesting to be able to see like how life was from, yeah, the perspective of women. It's just so crazy to me that so much of what we celebrate in museums is work by men. And it's like women were never given that opportunity at that time. So yeah, it was just something that I really like took like 5 minutes. I tuned out of the rest of the tour. I was really thinking about that. I don't know if that ever struck anyone else when they're going to a museum. And then the other museum I went to is the Fondation Louis Vuitton. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I think it's a lesser, I thought it was a lesser known museum, but when I got there, the lineup was hundreds of people deep, and I went on a weekday. Like, I was shocked to see that many people there, but I think it is one of my favorite museums of all of Paris. It is an art museum that they change collections twice a year. I think it's between contemporary and modern. I'm not too sure, but they change collections twice a year. And the entry is 16 euros, but within that price, you also have like free guided tours at every level of the museum. And the guided tours were so interesting, and they were 30 minutes, which I love because I'm not someone who can be in a museum for like 5 hours straight. I start to lose focus and appreciation like an hour and a half in. So I really did enjoy these quick to the point 30-minute tours on every floor. And the museum's really well done. It's like they order, like everything's chronological. So you have first works on the top floor and you go all the way up to the last works of the artist at the top floor. And so the visits or the guides are also chronological. And I don't know, it was a very beautiful museum. It was very well done. I enjoyed the tours, and I don't know, if you've never been to the Fondation Louis Vuitton, I really do recommend it. And it's also right beside the Bois de Boulogne, which is also a great place to go for a walk. So again, I'm like planning all these things for my itineraries, but yeah, I really, really did enjoy that museum. I definitely think you should check it out if you go. And for students, and I think anyone under the age of 25, they have a cheaper rate. I think it's like €5 per ticket. So yeah, that was really nice. And then the last thing I had on my list of topics is that I had my second basketball game this weekend. I definitely improved from my first game. My first game was very bad. It's hard for me. You guys know I've talked a little bit about the whole basketball drama and everything. But I previously was playing on a men's basketball team, and while I am very tall, I don't necessarily have the muscle build of the men. So sometimes I did get like a little bit pushed around, and I wasn't really on the same playing field as the men, and it was a very different experience for me. Again, I played on this team for 3 years, so it was a very different experience for me because when I was playing on women's teams back home in Canada, I was used to being a star of sorts in that I'm very tall. Like, it was easy for me to defend against other women, to score against other women because I am very tall. Like, I was so used to being the asset of a team as opposed to the water girl. And like on the men's team, I was definitely sitting a lot more on the bench than playing on the court. And a lot of the men acknowledged that they never passed me the ball because they didn't really acknowledge my presence. Like, they had this bias when they were playing with me, and they acknowledge it. Like, it was like an unconscious bias that they could see that they were doing, and they were like trying to fix it. But so anyways, all that to say, it's transitioning back to this women's team. I'm like going back to being an asset because of my height, and it's like learning a whole new basketball game. So the coach is like really helpful in getting me back into the groove of playing as the tallest person on a team. And the women, like the girls, I've never felt so supported in my life by other women. Like, these girls are just like constant support, constant encouragement. I'm like the new girl on the team, you know, they already have their friendships and stuff, and the fact that they're welcoming me like so in such a warm and kind way is just so nice. And there was even this one time at practice a couple weeks ago where the coach was explaining to me, he's like, no, you're tall, you need to get the ball, you need to dribble, and you need to score. You are 2 feet taller than these girls are, like, you can do it. And so on the next play, I did it, I scored, and all of the girls stopped and just started clapping and cheering. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys stop. I was like, And it was just like this, I don't know, just this encouragement, this feeling of sisterhood. Like it was amazing. So anyways, all that to say, we had a game this weekend, but no referees were scheduled for our game. And you obviously need referees to like play a game. It's a competitive team, the scores matter and stuff. And so my first instinct was like, oh, Jean, do you want a referee? But I didn't ask him. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna put that on him, because refereeing is hard. Like, you have to run the entire game. And Jean had already volunteered to do the scoreboard for our team. Like, you always, whenever you are the home team, you have to have someone doing the scoreboard, and we didn't have someone, and I asked Jean, he said yes, da, da, da. So he was already doing the scoreboard. Like, I didn't want to ask him to be like, oh, could you like be the referee? But then the coach texted me and he was like, do you think Jean could referee the game? We've called 15 other referees, nobody can do it. It's totally okay if Jean can't, but if he doesn't, we're not gonna play. And I already knew the answer, because I know Jean. I know his personality. I know that even if he's like tired, even if he is nervous, even if whatever, he will always do the right thing. Like, he'll always do the thing that will make other people happy and benefit, you know, the group. So I asked him and he was like, okay, yes, I'll do it. So it was so funny, like, playing this game and seeing Jean referee at the same time. And a couple girls on the bench actually turned, they were like, wow, Jean's actually a really good referee, because he was official. He's there like with his whistle, with all the hand signs, calling all the things. I was like, oh my God. Even me, I was like, oh my God, who is that referee? He's such a cutie. Like, it was, yeah, it was very funny. And I don't know, just another, yeah, I don't know. There's so many ways that I see that Jean is my person, and this was just like another layer on the cake, another cherry on the icing. I am constantly grateful for having such a good partner in life. But yeah, it was a very good week, very good weekend. I'm all smiles, obviously, even though I'm feeling a little bit out of it. But let me get to your questions. There weren't this many that week. That's why I ranted for quite a long amount of time. Thank you guys for submitting them. As a reminder, you can follow me on Instagram, and every Saturday I post a little question box, and you can tell me your thoughts, your comments, the tea. Okay, the first question is from Nonstop Paris, and she says, what are your 2024 travel plans? And initially I went into this year with great big travel ambitions and plans, but as I started to develop my website and my itineraries, I decided that I'm gonna put a lot of my travel on hold just to focus on my business, focus on my goals, and really focus on the itineraries, just because they are so time consuming. It's hard for me at this point, in just having like started my business, to take time off and go on vacation. That being said, I did have 2 trips that were already kind of planned. The first one is going to Amsterdam with my sister. We're going at some point in the summer. I should probably look at it. We haven't booked like flights or trains or anything yet, because I think we planned this trip like a year ago. We are going. We have a hotel booked. But yes, it's kind of like an impromptu trip. It's not something that we really like planned per se, but when my sister suggested the idea, I was like, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And the second trip I'm going on is with my parents to the Azores in, I think it's next winter. Again, I'm like not 100% on the plans, because it's not me that initiates the travel plans. Like, my parents have a friend who lives in the Azores, and so they're sort of like figure out the accommodations and everything. So I'm just going along for the ride. But my point is, like, when my family, especially because I don't live with them, I don't see them as often as I want to, as soon as someone in my family is just like, do you guys want to go on this trip? I'm like, yes. Especially if it's in Europe, or it's easily accessible to me, because like Amsterdam or the Azores, the flights, the trains, it's all relatively affordable. So that's it for 2024. Oh my God, I have a scratch in my throat. Yes, that is it for 2024. I really am focused on Paris at the moment, but who knows? Everything is kind of like up in the air sometimes. Like, I really do feel like it's hard to plan so far in advance. Even Greece, like the fact that I went to Greece, I literally planned that a month before my trip. So sometimes it's hard to plan in advance. Who knows? just going with the flow. Robin says, do you ever see famous people or rock stars, and do you change the clocks forward? You know what? I have never seen a famous person or a rock star in Paris, probably because I'm not like looking for that. I'm not super interested in celebrity sightings. Like, it's not something that is particularly of interest to me. I also specifically avoid crowded areas. So like when everyone was here for Paris Fashion Week, you will not find me anywhere near those crowds of people. Like, all of that overwhelms me. So I can't say I've ever seen any celebrities in Paris, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because I've been here for like years. And then do we change the clocks? We absolutely do, but because I have an iPhone and we don't have a physical clock, I've never changed them, and the iPhone just does it for you automatically. We definitely change our clocks forward, and I think it's before anyone in North America. I know that my time change happens before my parents in Canada, and it's always a problem because typically when I call them, I know they're 6 hours ahead, but like for a 2-week span, it's only 5 hours ahead. So yeah, we do change the clocks, just at a different time. I'm just not sure when. Next question is from Smiley Crazy. She says, love you. Can you please tell us about how French manage finances in a relationship? Oh, girl. Definitely in a way that's different, I think, from North America. This has always been a point of contention for me when I was dating in Paris. A lot of French men, especially like, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's dated French men, and also a significant portion of my friends are French men because of like my basketball team and everything. So I have had in-depth discussions and even debates about this topic because I don't agree with how most French men see splitting finances. But the French are very much 50-50. Like, it's not common that a man will pay for the first date. It's not common that a man will pay for a date. Like, it really is a 50-50 split the vast majority of the time. And this is a debate that I've had with my friends, with Jean even, because like there's so many reasons why I don't believe in a 50-50 split. I'll just give you one reason that I have debated with both Jean and the other men. One of the things that I tell them, I'm like, okay, so you ask a woman on a date, and she shows up to the date in very beautiful clothes, you know, with her hair and makeup done, with her nails painted, with her jewelry. And those are things that you appreciate, but it's just an extra cost for women. So it's like the women have the cost of looking this way, and also they have the cost of the date as well. Like, no, if you're, I guess what I'm saying is if you appreciate the extra things that a woman does for her appearance, then I don't think 50-50 makes sense, because those things cost money. And with Jean specifically, we had this discussion because, for example, I paint my nails. All the time I paint my nails. And one bottle of nail polish is 15 euros. And then you have the top coat, which is 15 euros. You have the base coat, which is 15 euros. It's 45 euros. Or you get a pedicure, 50 euros. Like, that's just one thing, for example, that I do. And I said this to Jean when we were having this topic. Like, it's not a debate we had, but we definitely talked about it just because I'm curious about his answer. And he was like, oh, well, like, I would love you if you painted your nails or not. So, like, I don't really see that as being a point as to why people shouldn't do 50-50. And I was like, okay, maybe you would still love me, but you appreciate when I paint my nails, don't you? He's like, well, I don't know. I don't think it really changes anything. 2 weeks go by. I paint my nails red. And he's all in there with the compliments. Oh, I love your nails. They look so good. I love the color. I'm like, oh, so you do appreciate when I paint my nails? So you do appreciate the 2 hours it took and the 3 bottles of nail polish I had to buy? So you do appreciate it or you don't? And like, I think it was at that point that he was like, oh, okay, I see the point. I see that it doesn't necessarily change the amount that you love someone, but it is something that I appreciate, and it's a cost, both time and money, that Arielle puts in. So, sorry, that was a very long-winded way of answering that question, but it is like a common debate with my friends and with Jean, like Jean less, but my friends for sure, because I have very bougie French men friends who have this idea of a woman they want. Like, I see the woman they date and I'm like, I know your type. I know you want a woman who comes to a date in beautiful clothing, a little designer purse, makeup and hair on point. Like, I know what you like aesthetically, but you have to acknowledge that there's a cost behind that. Like, you know? Sorry, I feel like I'm so sidetracked from answering the question. But all that to say, most men do 50-50. But I do think that, as with any relationship, it's always up for debate. Like, it's, you know, something that Jean and I have worked through, that we've talked about. I think that just because someone is from a certain country doesn't mean that they're going to be locked into that way of thinking for their entire life. Like, I don't know, it's a partnership, right? Like, when you're dating someone seriously, it's always good to have those discussions and like find a compromise. And yeah, but typically that is what I was met with when I was dating, 50-50 or nothing. And then the last question is from Kay. She says, do you think you'll remain a content creator for now? I would say that the content creation space has changed when it comes to how creators are paid, per se. When I initially decided to do this as a job, the payment system with AdSense and YouTube was different. It was higher. And that sort of made me feel like it would be possible to do this as a full-time job. And also at that point, there wasn't necessarily the explosion of short form content like TikTok and Instagram Reels that we have today. So I do think that it is much more challenging for creators, like small creators like myself, to make a living from this kind of work. That's why I'm adding in other facets of my business, like the itineraries. I have other things coming as well that I'm working through. So yes, I'm obviously going to remain a content creator, but in order to make it like a realistic income that you can support yourself on, at this point, I really do think you have to be adding, you know, other streams of revenue. I think as well, when it comes to content creators, I think the vast majority, especially like for me, I think I put out my first video probably 4 or 5 years ago. When you're starting, okay, when you're small, you don't have any monetary compensation. Like, until you reach a certain amount of subscribers and hours of viewership, you're not getting paid. So you go into it with just the idea of wanting to be creative, wanting to share, wanting to, you know, create community. And so even if I wasn't getting paid, I think I would still want to make content. You know, it's not, for me, it never started out as I want to make money, so I'm gonna put videos on YouTube. It was always like, I like to be creative. I love to talk about my experience living abroad. I love to share. I love to build community. That's why I'm doing this. So it's like a huge enjoyment for me to make content and be creative. So yeah, I'm very happy doing it. I think it's very hard to make a living off of it. At least that's what I'm learning. So yeah, I think I'll have to check back in maybe in a year to see how things are going. But yeah, for the moment, that's the plan. But I am gonna add, like I said, like other revenue streams to make it more feasible. I think as well, another problem that I have specifically is that I think a way that a lot of content creators are able to make a living from posting YouTube videos or whatever is to have sponsors. And I'm very selective with who I allow to sponsor my channel. I'm just careful what I want to promote. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how it goes. I'm enjoying it for now, and I think I'll always make content. Whether or not it's my primary source of income is a different story, but I really do just love being creative and connecting with people online. So deep. Okay, well, thank you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It's funny because when I wake up, like, especially because I am feeling a little bit down, I'm always like, oh gosh, like, is it gonna be a bad podcast? Am I gonna be boring? Am I just like not gonna smile? Like, it's hard for me to see myself being my bubbly personality on camera when I feel down. But then I turn on the camera and I'm like, yes, I get to talk to you guys, and it automatically brightens my day and like makes me smile and stuff. So yeah, that is all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on Thursday, I think.